Hey everyone, welcome to another Advocacy Hour. Happy May, happy Mental Health Awareness Month. So, we are talking about mental health in a very different way today. We're talking about it in the terms of purity culture and body positivity. And that's what our guest today, Phaith Montoya, is going to be talking a lot about. But I want to talk a little bit about how you grew up in the purity culture environment, Miss Rebecca Thomas, because as we say almost every episode, our our experiences in the church were very, very different. I really didn't have exposure to purity culture until I got to college, and I wasn't allowed to wear a tank top to class. I was like, first of all, it is like 105 degrees right now. Why can't I wear a tank top? It was the weirdest thing I've ever experienced. But I realized then that was the norm, and that specifically women had way more rules on what they were allowed to wear because you didn't want to let the men stray, which I was like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. But in a lot of faith-based spaces, it's really about controlling the women's body and how they present themselves to the public. I hate it.
Yeah, it is. Oh my gosh, I hate it too. And actually, so my daughter is 19, and I just think like it's so different how I have raised her versus how I was raised, right? Like my daughter wears whatever and has worn whatever she has wanted to basically since she's been in high school. Her schools had, various dress code, whatever. But I never put on her that it was her responsibility for how boys looked at her or what they might do because of how she dressed, which is very different than how I grew up. I never really understood how to live in a way that I wasn't being perceived in some way like that because it's literally how I was raised. So I think, putting into context mental health and purity culture is such a great it's a great combination of topics because I don't think we always put those two things together. Like how much a woman might shrink because of how much she's had to live being perceived her whole life. Like those are two extremely important pieces to put together. And the amount of anxiety that I grew up with because I might cause someone to stumble because they might it's just kind of crazy making, but I see the result of it now. I mean, we see it in our government. We have people in these men that we know things that have gone on, and that's all related to this. When we say it's not a trans person, not a person of color, not all, because it's all the white men from these religious spaces. It's because of this way of talking about purity culture, because we can't just be honest about or talk like a body is a body, like it's biology. We can't talk about it that way. We have to put it in this weird box about, making somebody stumble and now there's sin involved and all this, like the amount of anxiety that comes from having to live with that on your mind at 11 or 12 years old.
Right. It's insane.
That's crazy.
It's insane. And then you don't think about the lasting impacts of that psychological burden that's on you specifically as a woman. You want to be seen, but you don't want to be seen too much. You want to be confident, but not threatening. You want to be beautiful, but it has to be within these standards. It's like, geez, this is why I want to stay home, right? Because it's I can't check all of these perfect boxes of how you've created this woman, and I say elusive woman, but the idea of a woman in society to be. It's impossible to live up to those standards, and that affects your mental health. It will always affect your mental health. And I don't know how it doesn't affect it. How you show up in the world, how you show up in certain spaces, because you're always thinking about that. And also will cause so much insecurity, a lack of confidence, and just this constant worry of oh, are people looking at me? Is this too much? Am I doing this right? I don't know how it wouldn't affect somebody's mental health to always have to be thinking about those things when you show up.
Yeah. And just to put it into this real biology part, those are neural pathways that are being built every time a conversation might be had around how I dressed or, another girl dressed or even I remember going to youth retreats and there was no purpling. Right. And there's this whole just weird thing around you can't just have relationships with human beings, not really being taught how to do that. So these neural pathways that are developed because of this messaging don't just undo themselves. There is so much that we have to the self-talk involved to say nope, that's actually not really how God wants me to think about my body. That's actually not really how relationships need to work just because I was taught this. That is a process of undoing. as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
And, you kind of said some, like, don't be seen too much. And I was watching a clip from the Barbie movie, again, the speech that America
Oh,
Ferrera does in
so
there.
good.
And it's just a reminder of like, there is no winning. There is no winning.
Right.
Even if you like, I'm going to, with humility, seek to be seen. Well, you're still seeking to be seen. And so that's a bad thing. Like, there's just
Yeah.
no winning. And so I think this is just such a good topic. I know I can use these kinds of conversations,
Yeah.
even when I think I've like, okay, I've undone all of that. Nope,
Yeah.
it's still there.
Yeah. It lingers. It lingers. And then again, when you get into social media, because, those experiences happened pre social media, and now social media has just put even more spotlight on that, specifically for people that are public figures that are constantly trying to be seen, but also have to keep those things in mind, which is why we have our guest today, Phaith Montoya, to talk about that, because she is very visible on the internet, a great personality. She talks about body positivity. She grew up in purity culture and in Pentecostal church. So we're excited to have her, and we'll be right back with Phaith Montoya. Hey, everyone, welcome back. Today we are joined by Phaith Montoya. She is a creator and advocate whose work centers body positivity, mental health, and representation. Now, many of you may know her from her time on Survivor or her presence in the beauty and fashion space, but what makes her voice very distinct is how intentionally she uses visibility to challenge unrealistic standards and create space for people to feel seen. She's also an ambassador for the National Alliance on Mental Illness and works to expand conversations around mental health, particularly with multiracial and Hispanic communities. Phaith, thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you guys so much for having me.
Absolutely. So we are focusing on mental health this month. I know this mental health is something that's very important to me and Rebecca and our organization, the New Evangelicals. And so I want to talk to you a little bit from this perspective, because in a lot of faith-based spaces, particularly even the ones that Rebecca grew up in, I didn't necessarily have this experience, but purity culture was something that came up a lot in faith-based spaces, specifically conservative evangelical spaces. And I'm curious, do you remember early messages in your life, whether it's from your culture, or your family, or even faith-based spaces, about how you viewed yourself as a woman, about your body, just how you presented yourself in the world? Because I know now, being a creator and a public figure, you're probably even more susceptible to that scrutiny. But what were the earlier messages like in your life around those things?
Yeah, well, I grew up Pentecostal.
Okay.
So that was an interesting experience if,
Mhm.
you're aware of how they operate, very long skirts, like not
Yep.
cutting or dyeing your hair, very modest. And I think ever since I was young, I was always put on discipline. That's what they call it when you're like not going with the church rules. And I went to a Spanish church, so I'd be like, oh, I'm on disciplina. Like I was always there. But it was something that I feel like I never really attached with my relationship to the Lord because I was just like, I know what that looks like. And my mom raised me to be very just, strong minded and independent. And I applied that in every aspect of my life. So, yeah. And especially kind of being in a bigger body growing up, I also was like very hypersexualized. And I had to, kind of stand up for myself at a very young age.
Yeah, yeah. I think we can all kind of talk about those experiences. And I know Rebecca, in the experience that she had growing up, she probably has a lot to say about purity culture as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I can definitely identify with that. Having rules about what you wear. I actually also went to Catholic school, so I understand that having rules about what you can wear in a space, being judged on what you are wearing in a space. I mean, I can even thinking about going through puberty and like getting a bra for the first time and having it be noticeable and being so self-aware of that, because it was something you could see. So I'm wondering, just with the idea of like being perceived by other people, you use the word hypersexualized. It's funny too. My youngest is 11, and we were just talking about that yesterday, about the way that we don't always think about young men in a hypersexualized way, but the way that, and he brought this up. He's like, I don't know why we always have to hypersexualize girls. And I just thought, wow, he's 11 and he already gets that. That's not something that I was aware of at 11. So I guess I'm wondering then from that, like, when did you first become aware that you as a woman were being observed and judged?
Yeah, I think it's so funny you mentioned the bra thing because that was a big thing for me too, like getting a bra. And I remember people at church would like nickname me Victoria's Secret because you could kind of see my bra, like it wouldn't fit my bra in like a child's shirt, if that makes sense. So like you kind of see like the cups.
Mhm.
And it wasn't the look I was going for, but it was just kind of like what happened, and I didn't know any better. And I remember at school I used to get dress coded a lot, and I remember one of the
Mm,
bigger, like the administration women, she's plus size, and she would tell me, "You can't wear a skirt like that because you have bigger hips." And I'm like, how is that fair if the dress
yeah.
code doesn't say that you have to have a certain, circumference of hips to wear certain pieces, but because I'm wearing it, it's like, it's inappropriate or it can stop somebody in their tracks. I was
Mm,
very much in a constant state of like confusion why this was happening to me, why the rules applied differently to me. And I think that translated a lot in even my adult life. I remember I
mm,
had videos go viral about what I wore as a teacher. And I had to make videos about like, hey guys, business casual, usually that's form-fitting clothes. It's clothes that are tailored to your body. Like, yeah, I think we're in a different area where you can wear more loose-fitting stuff, but like I was just wearing like khakis and a sweater, but my body obviously is bigger. And people are
mm.
like, well, you're showing off your curves. Am I showing off my curves, or my curves existing in these clothes and you're just
Yeah.
observing them? Like it was always something. And so
Yeah.
I constantly had to teach people again and again.
And it's interesting and frustrating at the same time, the expectation that is specifically put on women to control what other people see and how they take in our bodies, or how we are presenting ourselves. Like, I can't control the way that I look, but you can control how you are looking at it and how you're
Right.
responding to it. But it's
Yeah.
never put on them. It's always put on us. And I imagine being a creator with a very large following that you're susceptible to scrutiny and commentary all the time. And so, since it is Mental Health Awareness Month, like, what does that do to you mentally? One, to always have to show up consistently for the people that look to you, that for your body positivity content, but also having to deal with those comments that are always talking about your body or talking about what you're presenting in the creator space. Because I know as a creator, like, I got to take time off sometimes. I deal with a lot of social justice and race issues that gets hard to deal with, but I'm sure it's a whole different ballgame when it's coming into the body positivity realm. So just how do you deal with your mental health in that space?
I think it's a lot more different than whenever I first started creating content because I had like another job, a main source of income where I could rely on to be like, I'm going to take a break, or I can like sit back and I don't have to show up smiling or poised on camera. But now that this is my full time job and my career for a few years now, I've definitely had to get into the habit of being like, I'm turning off the comments. And I've never done that before. I always wanted to be like a free form, free space for how I navigate just all of this backlash for simply existing sometimes. And I used to make a lot more educational videos earlier on when this wasn't my main job. But sometimes you just get tired of having to constantly educate and validate your existence. And it can be exhausting, especially when you feel like women that look like you, or even women that you feel like are supposed to be on your team, are the ones that are also going against you. And because for me, there's like, terrible men on the internet, and we know that they exist,
Sure.
and they're just kind of ridicule you for anything. So like I'll
For
take their
existing.
ridicule.
Just for
I in fact,
existing. Yeah.
I feel like I'm doing something wrong when I'm not getting ridiculed by them. Like I know I'm doing
Mm,
something right when I get a lot of hate from them. I'm like, okay, this is the part of the internet you want to hate you. But when it's like other women, I remember my mom's graduation last year. I made a video, such a sweet video, being like, how viewed my mom's graduation versus my sweet Bella, who like came to this country and sacrificed everything. And she just saw her little girl, and it was just such a
Mm.
heartfelt video. But
mm,
everyone could not get over the fact that the first clip is like me, but like from a lower angle because I'm not trying to get everybody. And it's like my chest is, a little bit there, but like I'm wearing a sweater dress from Free People that is not form fitting. I have a big chest, and I'm sorry, it's Texas. I'm not wearing a turtleneck to my mother's graduation. And
right.
my grandma loved that dress. My grandma's still Pentecostal, still goes to church. And that was like her favorite dress that I've ever worn. And I was like, you guys made it something that whether you were there, like you were trying to take away from your mom's big day, like you are,
Yeah.
just the worst type of daughter. You're the type of woman that seeks attention in every room. Mind you, an arena, a room full of like thousands of people. I'm like, I hardly
Right.
think anyone is looking at me. So in that moment, I just turned the comments off and I was like, silence. I don't have time to argue with all you about this situation because I had to put my mental health first and celebrate my
Yeah,
mom.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow. I think about that, like being perceived, right? And we talked about this a little bit. Like it's our responsibility to manage how other people perceive us, but it is also exhausting to, even in my own little world, to be perceived. And I have to tell my husband all the time, stop perceiving me. So on this like much larger scale that we're talking about, how do you navigate that pressure to present confidence while being honest about your mental health in this sphere where you are being perceived all the time?
I like to tell people I am not confident. I have blips of confidence, like I think anybody does. Sometimes we put on an outfit, you're like, ooh, I look good. You're feeling yourself. But majority of my days don't really exist like that. I think I show up and I honor myself more than I do my feelings. So I may not feel the best. I may not feel the prettiest, or I may feel vulnerable and uncomfortable to post certain things, but I have to honor my truth. And my truth is I deserve to wear a sundress and have my arms out, even though I used to hate my arms. Like I deserve to not have to wear a hoodie in the heat. I deserve to be open about my mental health, even though I know my life looks different and I know people are going to ridicule me for it. They're going to say, what? Like your life is easy. I wish I had that type of depression. But as much as uncomfortable as that makes me feel, I still have to honor my truth. And I have to exist in that. And when I go to the beach, I may feel uncomfortable in a bikini, feels really small. I feel a spillage, a rollover, but I know that I deserve to just be comfortable. And I'm not going to be wearing, a bathing suit that is going to be a mess to take off to use the bathroom, or I'm going to get crazy tan lines over, like I'm not wearing
Yeah.
a swimsuit
Right.
dress. I mean, that might be some people's ministry, but that just isn't mine. And I have to honor that truth, that I don't want to make my life more complicated to make my feelings feel valid when I'm just like, girl, just exist. It's
Yeah.
okay.
And also to make other people feel comfortable because, like, they
Yeah,
have to deal with their own discomfort just because you're confident in living in the way that you want to. Like you said, living in your truth, which I really love. It's the expectation to make other people comfortable that bothers me so much because
yeah,
that's them problem, right? That's not a you
right,
problem.
right. What would you
Yeah.
wear if nobody else was around is what I constantly have to tell
I
myself.
love that. I love that. That's a good
Great
internal voice
question.
to have. So there's for me with your identity on such a large social platform. There's two parts to it. There's obviously your body positivity, but there's also you being a multiracial Latina. And so, how do you see representation playing a part in what you do, and also how is it shaping your self worth and your belonging?
I feel like it is something that I've never felt like I had to navigate growing up. I went to like a predominantly Black school, so I just felt very like welcomed at home. And I'm a no sabo Latina, so like I wasn't with the Hispanic kids like speaking Spanish, but UI, which is a predominantly white institution for college, that I truly felt like the culture shock of what my race is. And I've written, like, it's kind of embarrassing how many papers I had written in college, like research papers, speeches on like race and identity. I went to get my DNA ancestry because I was so confused when I realized Hispanic Latino is not a race. And where do I fall in that space? Navigating that in the entertainment space has been really interesting because I feel as though when people see like Latinas, they see a lot of the ones that are like Eurocentric, sometimes blonde. They do speak the stereotypical, like Spanglish in their content. But I feel like the Afro Indigenous Latinas are the ones that are often overlooked, and kind of taking up space in that has just been such a privilege and such an honor that I even get included. And I constantly try to make more space for like Latinas that are darker than me, that are more indigenous, that have 4C hair, because we don't all look the same, and
Right.
just trying to advocate for that. And I feel like what a privilege it is to be in this position where I can even have the voice and be like, don't try to use me as, your a one size fits all Latina. Like I will constantly be the annoying person in the room that's like, well, let's get a browner in here.
I love that. Oh, that's great.
So we kind of talked a little bit about like your own internal, like the questions you ask yourself and like how to just kind of exist. But I am curious, like what has been more challenging for you to navigate the external criticism or that internal voice? So I know you have some tools and questions you ask yourself, but which one of those do you think has been more challenging to navigate in your journey?
I'm super grateful that I went to therapy before I ever had an online presence. Like,
Good for you.
genuinely, shout out to my university for having free therapy for their
Mm,
students. That was everything for me. I was somebody that, was on government assistance and had all the jobs one could imagine. So being able to have resources that benefited my mental health is like something I could never truly put a price on. But I think because of that, my internal voice, she's really strong. She is really
mm,
like, she lets things kind of just like roll off of her. She is very much like at peace with a lot of the things that I decide and come to terms with. I think it's the external things. And I think it's the being misunderstood that really hurts. A lot of the time, like I said, the men, I'm like, don't care about the hate, but it's like women that sometimes try to project, like, I'm your
Mm.
size, but like, I would never wear something like that. I
Oof.
would never feel like I know you're in pain. Like your clothes are too small. Like you should be wearing, we're the same size and I'm so much smaller than you. So it's like those voices that I'm like it it hurts, but I think more so it hurts because it's like who poured this into you? That you're
Sure.
trying now to pour this into me. And I'm like trying to cover my cup to like make sure that none of their negativity is like getting into it. But it does become hard at times because it's like I'll click on their page and they just look like a woman that does look just like me.
Yeah.
And I think she's beautiful. And I hate that she thinks that way enough to that she has to like spread it on me. And then her comment will have like 1,000 likes. So I'm like, okay, so a
oh,
thousand people also agree with this this person.
Yeah.
So I think that is the hardest part.
That's really difficult. I will say, from a personal standpoint, the liking of bad comments hurts me more than the comment
Yeah,
itself.
I'm like,
Because you're like,
what?
all these people agree with you. This is terrible. Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's hard not to get in your feelings about that stuff because when you become a public figure and you're online, people think that they can say whatever they want to you, and it does start to chip away a little bit at your self-worth and how you feel about yourself and all of those things. But have you learned to kind of separate your worth from that engagement and the perception and the public response? Because I know, again, content creators, you make content, you love the good comments. We all love the likes and the reposts and the reshares, but it is hard to not get in your feelings about that small percentage of the negativity because we're still human at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
And we still have feelings and we still have a heart. And I feel like people don't look at content creators as human for some reason. Like they forget that we have lives off of social media, off of the TikToks and the Instagrams, and that we have families, we have children, we have best friends, we have, moms and dads, whatever the case may be. So yeah, with all of that engagement, have you been able to separate your worth from those comments and those likes and all of those things that come with being a creator?
Yeah, absolutely. I always say, like, I have love in real life. Like, I have family and friends that I really pour into. I have a beautiful relationship that I have, just spent so much of my life, like, nourishing all of those things that, like, yes, the internet can be annoying, especially when it comes to like the perception of like likes and the numbers of it all. But a big part of like my story and what I'm trying to preach to people is like, don't let a number on a scale or number on a measuring tape or your age define you. So why would if I'm not going to let those numbers define me, why would I let numbers on like Instagram define
mm,
me? If it's 100 people, like that's 100. Imagine 100 people in a room being like, "That's fly," like you're so cool,
Mm.
or I like this. So I try to be like, I have to be appreciative of it all. Whether it's sometimes I get 100,000 likes, sometimes I only get 1,000, but like still 1,000 people being like, I like this, or I like you, and I enjoyed this piece of content that you created. So I feel like it's been a harder transition to kind of like not compare those numbers because it is your job. But I think having the love in real life and wrapping myself in like my community and my village has just kind of kept me like really headstrong in that.
That's
Mm.
great. I love
Thank you
that.
for sharing that. I really I had a friend who would say that too about like the individual people. So I think that's like a good reminder that every like, every reshare, all of that, that's a person, right? It's not
Yeah,
just a computer algorithm. Those are real people. And I love that you brought that up and that you think about that. I also really want to say I appreciate just the reminder about age and numbers on a scale. I'm like in the middle of the like perimenopause thing. I tell Melinda all the time, I can't remember anything because and that's been really hard for me. So I just want to say thank you for bringing that up and reminding all of our listeners, but especially me right now about that. um,
of
I
course.
also, I'm curious too. You talked about in your at college, and you had resources available to you like therapy. Is there anything else that has helped you to build your mental health to a place that feels really good to you right now?
I think I also went to a psychiatrist. So that was a big thing. And it's a part of mental health, I think, that is a little bit more taboo because people don't like to talk about the medicinal side of it all. And I've been very open about the fact that I have been medicated. I didn't even know there was medication for eating disorders, specific eating disorders like mine, binge eating disorder. But there are obviously medications on like antidepressants, anti anxiety, but being okay with being like, it's okay that I needed a little bit more help than just therapy could give. And that I might have to take this for a while or even my whole life, and destigmatizing that and coming to peace with that
Mm.
was a big part of my journey as well. And I always encourage anybody that's listening that like it's okay if you have to go see a psychiatrist is on top of going to therapy. Like you're not more wounded or you're not more damaged goods. You're just somebody that might need a little bit more help. I think there's so many things in our life, like our phones that are now hijacking our brains. Our like
Right.
neural pathways are like, just overstimulated all the time. We're just
Sure.
have so much access to so much news and so many things. So like if my brain was needing that much assistance even like 6 years ago, I can only imagine now that like we have to rewire these things and we probably need a little bit more help, and there's systems that are set up to make you feel more debilitated. So it's like it's okay to
Yeah.
need something else and like not feel shame around that.
Absolutely. And I think also because a lot of our listeners come from faith based spaces, there is a stigma from people coming from those spaces that, like, you don't need therapy, you only need Jesus. It's like, you need both, you know? And I have a huge component of that. I have a sweater that says you can have Jesus and therapist too. But it's good for people to hear that because there is this push that if you go to seek help outside of prayer or outside of your pastor, that somehow you're questioning God or you're not trusting. And I'm sure you probably experienced this being in the Pentecostal environment, that was like the language that was shared. And it's so harmful. And that actually chips away at your mental health even more because you're wasting time thinking, okay, all I have to do is pray. All I have to do is talk to my pastor. When no, you actually should be seeking help from a professional that knows how to handle this. I'm all about prayer. I'm all about talking to the pastor. But again, I love that you're like, it's okay. And we want to encourage
Yeah.
people get the help that you need because again, faith without works is dead. Always say that. If you
No, that's my
believe,
fave.
right? But it's true. It's so simple but so effective, and we talk about that all the time. It's really important. But I love that in your trajectory, in your journey, now this has been such a part of what you do, and so you're now an ambassador for the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Can you tell us a little bit about the work that they do and how you work as an ambassador with them?
Yeah, so they kind of just bring resources to communities that wouldn't have them any other way. And I feel like the conversations about eating disorders constantly don't include binge eating disorder. I think because it's not as glamorized like in the media, and there's not like movies about it, and it's not really widespread. And I think a lot of people have this perception that if you're fat, that like you can't have an eating disorder. Like there's no way. That's just like your own doing. You did that to
Mm,
yourself. When a lot of binge eating people that have binge eating disorder, it was developed because of that lack of like belief and like constantly putting yourself on diets maybe at a young age. That's how I developed mine. My brain is constantly like in that fight or flight mode thinking, when's the next time I'm gonna have to starve myself? because I was
Mm.
going on like military diets, slim fast, Weight Watchers at such a young age that my brain is always holding its breath, waiting for another moment where I'm going to put myself on a diet that it's like, let's eat everything in sight to like stock up. And if people would have just believed that me gaining weight maybe when I was younger wasn't like a me thing and it wasn't solely because of my choices. If I would have got my hormones checked earlier, they would have realized I have hypothyroidism. That was an autoimmune disease I got at 13 years old. And we could have gotten the help, and I would have probably never developed an eating disorder. And I probably still wouldn't be in recovery 15 years later, still battling with it. So I'm just so grateful to be able to work with NAMI and like bring those resources, and also just that advocacy for an eating disorder that really isn't spoken about. And I love how you brought up like the faith-based situation of it all, because a lot of people are like, girl, like you just need Jesus. And I'm like, sis, I've had Jesus, me and him locked in, but I also don't believe he loves me any less because he didn't cure me from my autoimmune disorder. I
Yeah.
still got
Yeah.
that, you know. And I
Yeah.
think it's about learning how chemical a mental illness is. They think it's just like a feeling, but it's like actually like dopamine sometimes being deprived from your brain, or like that part of my brain that is scared to be starved again is like getting ticked off. That's a neural pathway that was born out of just survival. And Jesus doesn't love you any less because he didn't change that neural pathway, or he didn't cure your cancer, or that he didn't take away that disease. He's using you to live through it and hopefully inspire others to continue to live through it, and make the most out of chaos and madness. And I feel like people are constantly trying to be like, no, you just need Jesus. I'm like, we got it, we got Jesus. Like, trust, if I have anything, that I have that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you said in amidst the chaos. And I think that that's such a great phrase, because sometimes it can feel like that, but realizing like there is a path through, and Jesus is part of that path, but not the only piece of it. And I also, just as you were talking, was reminded of how many things women are dealing with all the time that aren't necessarily talked about. Even like scientific testing is more focused on the impacts on men than it is on women and all of that. And so I think even having these conversations around medication, like women weren't at the top of the priority list there. And now I'm so glad that these conversations are being had more in public, that influencers and content creators are talking about it. I am curious, what conversations around mental health do you think might still be missing, especially for women?
I feel like a lot of conversations about ADHD, simply because that's like something that I've suffered with all my life, and again is am medicated for. It's something that you see very commonly in men and like what that's supposed to look like. But I feel like with women, it's so overlooked because we're not like jumping
Mm.
off the walls.
Yep.
But sometimes we're like, crashing out before our period because, PMDD, I think, is like a comorbidity with ADHD. And there's like so many things
Mhm.
that like you feel like so overwhelmed. So you get into like executive dysfunction and like you can't do anything. But
Yep.
that doesn't look the same as like, being a chatterbox or jumping off the walls or like, moving your leg or the things that you see in boys. And it's so common to like look like that. And I know for me, I got such a late diagnosis. It wasn't until I was on academic probation because I had like failed a few of my first classes in college. And then I got the help and I was like, they're like, yeah, you're like, you have severe ADHD. And I'm like, the way I never knew. And it was always overlooked because my brother was the one that had ADHD. And he was put in the classes that, could help him with that. He was offered all the resources. And I was just kind of like left to be like, oh, she's just somebody that is going to get it done regardless. But like, it can be overwhelming
Mm.
for her at times. And they never really put a diagnosis on it. That's just who I was. But getting that diagnosis helped me so much. It helped me to understand why I feel the way I do, why I crash out around like 5 p.m. every day, why my energy is like depleted and I have to go nonverbal at times.
Yeah.
But it gave me so many answers that I feel like a lot of women are, spent their whole lives not ever knowing. And that's
Yeah.
unfortunate because they could have been even more successful. I mean, I see why they try to put us down. Like we already,
Sure.
make so much out of what we have. It's like
Mhm.
I was on the dean's list every semester after that, basically.
Wow.
That's amazing. But yeah, hearing you say that, it's very true. I feel like it's way more common to hear about boys having ADHD, and it just looks differently in girls, so they don't diagnose it and they don't treat it. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, do I have ADHD? Like listening to you describe
Listen,
it,
I'm
I'm
always
like,
like,
wait a minute.
get tested. That's me. I'm always like,
Right.
get tested. I'm telling everyone,
Yeah.
get tested.
But like it's true. I mean, it's not looked at the same. You just think boys that are like crazy or like running around like, oh, they have ADHD and that's where you put all of your attention, but it just looks differently with
Yeah.
girls and with females, and they just
Yep.
ignore it or think that I don't know what they think, but it's very unfortunate. And also now, you see like a lot of funding for like women's health is going out the door, and so it's going to be harder for things to even be diagnosed and treated. But I'm grateful for the work that you're doing and how much you're
Yes.
putting a spotlight on this and the work you're doing with NAMI. Can you tell people where they can follow you and also keep up with the work that you're doing, please?
Yes, you can follow me on Instagram, TikTok, everywhere, just at Phaith Montoya, Faith with a PH, Montoya.
Love it. Love it. Love a simple
Amazing.
username. Well, Faith, thank you
Yes.
so much for joining us. It was a beautiful conversation. Thanks for all the work that you're doing. And happy May. Happy Mental Health Awareness Month.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Rebecca, you close us out.
Oh no. Oh no. Okay.
Out. You're fine.
Oh
Recap the
my God.
conversation. Say whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah. Okay. What a fantastic conversation we had with Phaith Montoya today. I just want to really shout out to her. Just some amazing things brought to the surface, including PMDD, talking about
Yeah.
anxiety, ADHD, and just the realization that there are so many resources available, NAMI being one of them. And so I'm really glad that we had somebody from that organization. I've known a lot of people who have benefited from NAMI. And so I'm really glad that we got to talk to her today. And just, what a great guest to have for our Mental
Yeah.
Health Awareness Month. Yeah.
Yeah. And she's also was very relatable. And I think that that's what people need to see, just like normal people that also struggle with mental health, right?
Yeah.
We don't see enough of that for people to be seen, to be like, oh, this person that I follow or whatever, this content creator, this influencer is a normal person. They have the same types of struggles that I do. So I really loved that she was able to share her story and coming from the church and understanding like all of that purity culture stuff. But yeah, I love her body positivity content as well. So thank you, Phaith, for joining us. We will have a ton of resources for you in TNE Connect. If you go to thenewevangelicals.com/connect, under content and resources, we'll have a lot of mental health awareness resources, including a link to NAMI, however they pronounce it, but you guys know what we're talking about. And we have a new how-to resource for spiritual reset as well that you can check out. But go to TNE Action and go to our content and resources, and we'll have all that available for you. Thanks again for listening. Make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll see you next Advocacy Hour. Bye.
Bye.